Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Coffee Chat, sponsored by the SA Property Investors Network. My name is Carly, and I'm hoping that we're going to have a fun-filled and educational hour for our show. Okay, so for those of you who don't know how this works, first of all, welcome and thank you for joining us. What this is essentially Coffee Chat. It's a quick hour where we get to discuss all things relating to property, brought to you by the SA Properties Investors Network. And if you don't know who that is, well, that is short for, that is the long version of SAPIN. What we do is we connect, and we are a group of like-minded individuals who want to learn and grow in the property space. What we do is we educate and we align you with the individuals that you will need in your property journey. It's that simple. And as always, we always have a little bit of fun when we start off, and that is, I would like to know where you are viewing me from. The ongoing rivalry between Cape Town and Johannesburg will forever be happening, but just let me know where you're viewing us from. And if this is your first time and you are a little bit shy, it's fine. You can just send a wave and let me know that this is your first time. And if you're not shy, please just let me know, how did you hear about us? And as always, we've got to do a little bit of housekeeping. And the first things first is that we are going to be having a few events. The first one is including our guest for today, and that's Leon Kasselman. For those of you in the know who are in the property, you understand his expertise are absolutely phenomenal. We're going to be having him a little bit later, but he will be having a more in-depth webinar tomorrow with Daniel Kazadi, discussing the very topic we're going to be doing today. But today's like a brief overview. So you guys kind of have a brief and just like blanket understanding, but they go more in depth tomorrow in the webinar. So please just go to our website so you can register for free for that webinar. It's going to be very insightful and very, very informative. And also we have an upcoming event in Cape Town regarding the workshop. However, I just want to know from you guys, as I said, we have, hi, Leon. We have Zandi, who is from Cape Town. So just keep it coming, guys, and let me know where you're viewing me from. And also, if this is your first time, how are you doing? A quick one for anybody who is actually looking to renovate, be it in your own personal capacity or one of your investment properties. SAPIN has launched a new, invigorating, and very, very fun initiative called SAPIN Kitchens. We're going to be hearing more about that pretty soon, and that is in partnership with Tim Build. All right, for those of you who are old, not me, if you remember Timber City, yes, they have now been retransformed and are now called Tim Build, and they do customized kitchens for a very affordable price. And obviously, if you go through us, they will be incentive for you, and you will get a more in-depth understanding when you see our kitchen that they built for us. So I'm super excited for you guys to take on this journey with us with SAPIN Kitchens. So that's pretty fun. Let's see, we're still talking. Lucy, hello. Lucy is from Cape Town, and also we're going to be launching a few other things that are going to be happening within the SAPIN world. And I'm super excited for that. And as always, we're going to be having our golden nugget from SAPIN Prepaid from our facilities expert extraordinaire, Bevan. He will be joining us a little bit later, discussing SAPIN Prepaid. But the topic for today is one that is very close to my heart, and one that is close to every investor. If you're serious about investing in property or learning how to invest in property, you need to understand fundamentally about negative cash flowing properties. Yes, it is amazing for you to have purchased your property and you're taking your first stride, or you've accumulated enough for you to understand that you have quite a portfolio. But what happens when your properties are cash flowing negatively, right? It's one thing to say, oh, I have properties, but if you're not making a profit, or at the very least breaking even at the end of the month, you no longer have assets. You have liabilities. And this gentleman, Leon, is going to help us unpack that in a little bit more in depth. But like I said, the webinar that is happening tomorrow is where he properly excavates this phenomena. Look at English disappearing. The disrespect of negative cash flowing properties, and how to optimize your portfolio. Be it you're starting and you don't want to start on the wrong foot, or you want to make sure that as you grow your portfolio, you never catch yourself in the blunder that is negative flowing cash flows. But if you don't mind me introducing this gentleman. Leon, how are you, sir?
Very well, thank you. And yourself?
I am good. Thank you so much for joining us and giving us some time to, discuss this very, very important, if not one of the most important lessons for any potential property investor, entrepreneur, whether you're starting out or you have, an in-depth property portfolio. This is something that does, unfortunately, happen to the best of us.
Absolutely, yeah, you're 100% right. And yeah, one of the things that I do is the blueprints in the for Property Academy and Sappin, and in there you can clearly see the trends and the type of challenges that investors face. And there are definitely clear themes that are running through, and we'll be exploring some of that in our conversation today.
Alrighty then. So before we start unpacking and going in there, as always, ladies and gentlemen, I encourage you to please ask questions in the chat box, and we'll make sure our expert guest answers those, because these are one of the few times you'll be able to ask young questions for free. Because outside of that, you will actually have to book him via Sapin Connect. But Leon, before we get into any level of in depth, let's first understand who Leon is. And I'd like for you to just tell us briefly about your journey in terms of who you are and what exactly do you do.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Kari. I'm a professional property investor. I have a portfolio that is spread over Gauteng, also in Cape Town and in KZN. And I cover different type of strategies. And over the course of my part-time and then professional property investors career, I've dealt with pretty much most of the strategies in one way or the other, except developments. That one I haven't tried, but we are building with a building conversion from commercial into student accommodation, but that's not quite a brand new development from scratch. Still on the to-do list. I semi-grated to KZN, so I'm based there on a permanent basis down at the south coast, or the slow coast, as some of the guys always tease me nowadays. My background is I was a business enterprise architect working in the banks in the group strategy areas. I have an IT and a business management background. I spent 40 years in different corporates in mostly blue chip organizations, but also dealing with smaller companies. And from that, I gained a huge amount of experience, which is now very useful. I found it very useful in setting up my property business and the strategies, etc. It's the same techniques. And with that background, it helps me to also help others. I'm now semi-retired, but I'm always involved in one way or the other. As you guys know, we have a lot of contact with each other on a regular basis for different products, and we keep on enhancing the SAP and offerings that we've got. Part of those offerings that we do have is the consulting services that are rendered to SAPN and TPA investors. I do investor needs solutions and needs assessments, which basically looks at any investor, whether you're experienced or in an advanced or still a starter, you're just thinking about stuff. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses and gaps? And then we work out how SAPN and TPA can assist you with the appropriate next steps and an action plan, and what's the right solutions for you. So that's quite an exciting one, and something that we find very, very useful. Once that is done, I also do buying plans for investors with new investors that have got 0 to 1 properties. You haven't started out at all, or you've just got like your one personal property. Then a buying plan is the type of thing that I do for those guys, that help them set up their business properly. We do pre-qualification. There's a lot of things. We'll get into more details of that if required. And then the biggie one, which is really where the insights for this conversation today comes from, is the blueprints, right? The investment blueprints and portfolio performance reviews, which I do together with the rest of the blueprint team. That's for investors with 2+ properties. So these are guys that have invested, they've tried one or more strategies, and they've had the properties for a period of time. And now we review that. We review their business, the whole setup, and it's quite an involved process. So I see Leonard is here. We worked with him. He's one of the guys that are Blueprint customers. The last 2 things about me that's relevant for this conversation is I'm a partner in a prop tech company as well. We have a platform where we do funding originating between banks on the one side, the more traditional ways, and then also other type of things, not just for bonds and home loans, but we cover anything from personal loans through cars, commercial loans, both secured and unsecured, all flow across our platform. And we keep on growing that as the other part of my always involved motto. So then the last thing is about me. I like to work with people and help people. So I like to stretch investors' minds about their investment strategies, about how they approach business, and how they can improve their performance over time. Yeah, so that's me in a nutshell, Kelly.
Alrighty then, that is quite a mouthful. As always, we have experts over here at the coffee chat. So let's just get straight into it, Leon. How and why would somebody buy a negative cash flowing property?
Okay, so I think for that, is it possible for me to share my screen with you guys?
Let's just see. Yes.
You've got the documents there, right? Or should I do it from the side?
No, I have on. There we go. Yes.
Okay, 100%. So if you can go to the next page, please.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, you're struggling a bit there because you're using that particular side. I wonder if I can't share it from my side, Kelly, just to be on the safe side. It's not displaying. So let me do that rather from my side if it's okay.
No problem.
All right, cool. So let me just press share here. And then my apologies for this. If you guys have any questions, etc., please feel free to ask them in the comments section, and then we'll take it from there and try and answer them as best as what we can. So, okay, so can you see my screen at the moment?
Yes, there we go. It's a bit blurry though.
Is it a bit blurry?
There we go. Okay, that's better.
Okay, 100%. So the question is, what are the considerations for buying a cash flow negative property? Why would you be thinking of that, right? And the answer is always opportunity, opportunity, opportunity. And sometimes it's just because I want to buy. And those are the dangerous ones. But when it's opportunity and it's informed opportunity, it is a good thing to do. So some things to consider is the economic context where we are at the moment, right? So we're sitting in a bit of a challenging environment at the moment. It's always good to just look at the big picture before we go detail. There's high inflation at the moment, and inflation drives costs. And costs for an investor is something which erodes our profits. So we've got to be very careful of that element. There's specifically high interest rates, and for anybody with debt, that also means that you've got to be aware that interest rates can go up and they can come down. They go through cycles, and I'll show you some cycles just now. And just that's something to consider. Then the challenges that we've had through COVID or other local and international factors, the slow growth in economy, it's a job turndowns, has also created demand changes for investors, right? That means that if you own a property and you're running specific strategies, the demand for that type of property and strategy could change, and it has changed in many respects. That creates risks, but it also does create opportunities. So it's about being educated enough and understanding and working with people that know how to take advantage of that. And the last thing is then supply changes. That's the properties that come onto the market and how the supply of properties that are available to be purchased or rented, how things are changing in that space. And at the moment, it's very much with the high interest rates, a lot of properties on the market for sale, and that creates a lot of opportunities for investors. So that's kind of the big picture, the four big aspects that's important. So then we also look at the interest rate. That's the biggie for most investors. Most of us leverage through bonds and buy through bonds or finance. And interest rate is probably the biggest factor that can impact on your cash flow. So this is the trend for interest rates since 2014, and you can see that it goes up. It's always on the move, right? Depending on what happens in the economy. So it went up, and it was at 10.5 in 2016. And then good times started happening, and it started drifting lower, and then COVID happened. And suddenly the interest rates plunged as the economists try to protect the economy, right? And make sure that people still can afford to do stuff. And then as that COVID ended, the interest rate started going up because people were spending money on other things. And now the SARB has to kind of contain the spending again and just make sure that inflation stays inside its target. And that's just why this fluctuates. It's just a continuous chess game that they play. All right. However, for investors, numbers and risk profiles should drive our decision, right? So there's always pros and risks, pros and cons, or just opportunity and risks. And on the pro side, when you consider a cash flow negative property, that might be cash flow negative now, but if these sort of factors are good or have potential, then you would definitely consider that property. It's in a good area. It's in a great environment, right, within the broader area. So it's like next to the school or close to school or close to the transport areas. It's near to the shops. And then the location, right? It's in a quiet street there, or it's not on a very busy traffic. It depends what your strategy is. And then out of that, it has potential for cash flow and capital growth. That's a very important one. Location is still always key, right? Then on the number side, acquisition costs. If you can get that cash flow negative property at a substantially below market price cost, right? So you determine through your running the numbers that the market value for that property is R1,000,000, and you can pick it up for 700K or anything below 800 or so, that you've got a 20% below, 20% plus below, then it ticks another box. Then some other considerations, can you apply multiple strategies on it, right? And is rental increases possible? And is there opportunity to create sustainable cash flow with headroom? It's not something that you can get for 6 months and then suddenly there's nothing. And then your expenses and risks and bond payment increases in particular must be manageable. And the last thing when you run numbers is that your input costs versus your potential profits, or the short term for that is return on investment, that formula, if that sits above the 20% when you run your numbers, these are all pros, okay? Good things for why you would consider that. On the risk side, the only things that you really should be worried about primarily is if it's, the opposite of all the things that we said on the left-hand side, but specifically, if you determine that the current cash flow is bad, but it's only due to the owner's approach to how he manages or what he does on that property, he hasn't unlocked the potential. So then you see the opportunity, and then you can manage that risk. You know that you can manage it because of your skills, education, and power teams. The future, if you can handle the future bond payments in a rising interest rate environment, we always try and test about 3% above whatever the prime rate is, and whatever you can get at the bank, plus another 3% on top of that, then you're safe, right? And you can manage that risk. If there is capital growth in the area, it is an area that's good. We don't bank on that, but it's always a great bonus for us. The good thing is cash flow. There must be cash flow. If your numbers don't work, the risk is not worth taking on, right? Then you wouldn't consider that. And the last thing is just the tenant's demographics, right? What LSM is in there? What, if you draw a TPN report, what sort of profiles of people? What is it? Families in the area? Do the profiles of people in the family? Is it mostly single people? Then you wouldn't bring a big house on the market, which is geared for family. Then you would rather go for smaller places, as an example. Okay, and those are the kind of things, Kelly, that would drive your decision around, am I interested in a cash flow negative property? And the answer is definitely yes, as long as you consider some of these things.
And what is very interesting is when you say there are times where it actually is a good decision to take on a negative cash flowing property. However, there are other times where you find yourself, with no effort on your own part, unfortunately, having a negative cash flowing property where that was not the intent at all, but you're now, bleeding from your pockets because your property has now been negative and it's cash flowing incorrectly. So in those instances where it wasn't a conscious decision or part of a strategy and a plan, because we understood it will turn into positive at some point, where you possibly purchased with the assumption, and that's what we don't do. We don't just assume things. We run numbers. That's why we're part of SAPIN. However, to those who are new and may or may not have been aware of this, and now unfortunately they're in a predicament, their property or properties are not cash flowing property. Can a negative cash flowing property be saved?
I think that it definitely can, subject to certain things that you need to consider, right? And by the way, it'd be wonderful to hear some of the investors' comments on as we go through the conversation. Kali, if you can just keep that while I'm now sharing my screen, I can't see the questions that are coming in. If there are any, just pop them in at the relevant time, and we'll try and deal with them, right? If it's possible.
Yes, no, we're already getting questions, but we will save those. But definitely, all of the questions that are being asked are definitely going to get through them. Yes.
All right, so then let's go with this next one, right? So if you already have an into a property and in your portfolio there, either your entire portfolio, we see this often that the entire portfolio overall is cash flow negative for some investors. They invested in properties, but they bought based on agents. The decision making up front and the numbers doing wasn't too good, or the risk planning, the mitigation of these factors on the risk side. They didn't test at what happens if the interest rate rises 3 or 4 or 5% above where we are. And now you're stuck in a situation where you are dealing with a cash flow negative situation. So let's look and see what you possibly can do and what should you consider to see if one of your properties is in that space, what you might be able to do. So at the highest level, if the cash flow is negative, or even not necessarily negative, but just much reduced, right? You're barely scraping even, or you had great cash flow and now suddenly it's just dropped. There are really two levers that you can draw on, and we'll go into a little bit more detail on the next page. But in principle, you can try to increase your rental income from it on the one side. So make more money from it is the one aspect. And the second one is obviously to decrease costs. Cost is something that goes directly off your bottom line. So the first focus is always on cost. What can you trim out of cost? And you should actually be doing this on an ongoing basis. And then the other side is also, what can you do to increase rental? That's the first thing. So you can pull those two levers, increase rent and decrease costs. But there's another option that goes with that, right? So we always invest for cash flow, but there is also the factor of the area and capital growth. So I always look at these two things together, and the blueprints, in our blueprints, we always look at these as a joint decision, right? It's not one or the other always. So if there's reduced capital growth, what we see with COVID is that many areas took a big dip, right? And across the board, the shock of it was a big shock to the system. So people got stuck into it, and a lot of people lost their income, and there was just a supply shocks. Capital growth went for a pair. Now, if you have poor cash flow or negative cash flow, and there is zero or very low capital growth or even negative capital growth in your area where you invested, if the answer to those and the combination is yes, 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 then that would be something in my portfolio that I would consider unloading, right? It makes no sense to keep it. If you can't increase the rental income, you can't decrease the costs, and you're losing money over time. You paid $1 million for it, and now the market value in that area for that same property has dropped to 800 or 700,000 rand. You've basically lost capital of some of your capital, and then you need to understand when to draw the line. And it's better to do things like this and continuously monitor and not pick it up 5 years down the line, but rather watch the trends. However, you can, if there's equity, if you've had some capital growth, you can also use some equity that is in that property to help you reduce with other bond amounts or invest in high yield areas and unlock for property. What do I mean by that? So let's just quickly go into one more slide with a bit more detail on this and see what that is. Now, as an investor, we're really business people, right? This is not a hobby. You can't treat it like a hobby or, oh, it's nice to do, etc. The financial implications of these decisions you're making and the business that you're building is substantial. And it can get you a lot of trouble, but it can also give you a world that you never thought was possible. So it's your approach, your day-to-day behavior. What do you do every single day or every week, every month as a business rhythm? Do you assess your property portfolio? Do you plan? Do you review and plan? Do you have a roadmap? And do you execute on whatever comes out of those areas and keep going around in circles? You don't have to do this every hour or every day, the full day. but at least periodically, weekly or monthly. Look what's happening in the area. So your mindset, your day-to-day behavior, your investment mindset, and coupled with your business management process, this rhythm that I'm talking about here, that is one of the biggest factors that will determine where your portfolio is going to and how your decisions are made. Okay, so if you just unpack the day-to-day behavior and what I mean by all this, so what does that all really mean? It means be proactive and involved in your business, not reactive, right? Wait till the pawpaw eats the fan and then try and fix everything. Then it's too late. So rather be proactive, and by proactive, track the trends, the direct trends, what's the interest rate doing, where's it going to, understand what they're doing, the direct and the indirect ones. Review your business, your portfolio, and your property performance regularly. Make some ongoing small tweaks. Small tweaks are better than big, try and fix everything at the same time, right? You prioritize one thing at a time, and then you do it as soon as possible to get that impact. And then you track the impact of those changes and you adjust as needed. And then the last thing is, it's very difficult for most investors who work on this part-time and don't have all the necessary knowledge or experience to do this on their own. And that's why in the network, we've got specialists and coaches as well as education. So SAPN and TPA is brilliant at that. And then, of course, the party members like myself, etc. So those are the kind of things that you can do. And then a last thought around this specific topic of what are some tactical interventions, right? If we expand on the increased rental income, how can you increase your rental income? What are the type of things, what are the levers that you can pull under that one? So most leases, if you use a proper TPN lease or in your lease as an investor, you've put in that clause and not scratched it out that says, if there are any levy or services or consumption-based related increase, you have the right to increase your rent. If that clause is not in your contract, then please consider adding something like that, because that's a way that you can protect yourself. Even if you fix the rent at 10,000 Rand a month, and your levy suddenly goes up by 10% or 15%, all their special levies or anything like that, which destroys your income, then you can pass, because of the lease terms, you can pass that on to a tenant, right? And then you're not in this all by yourself, and you're the one that takes the knock. You can consider a change in your strategy. You can go from a single buy-to-let where there's just one person or one family and you've got a big property. You can try the multi-let, the room by rooms, or short-term letting like Airbnb or so, and change your strategy, or do a hybrid of those, right? All those are levers you can pull on the income side. And then you can also add improved features to attract higher rent or better tenants, right? If you add, and for that you would use Lightstone, TPN, and other research. What are tenants looking for, and what are they prepared to pay more for? Power backup solutions is a good example of something like that. People are looking for a place where they've got some power when the lights are off, right? That's a massive differentiator. Can you put that and charge an extra 20% rent? Those are the kind of things, right? So that come to mind immediately. On the decreased cost side, what can you do there? So the first thing is eliminate any unnecessary costs or features that you're paying for that is not directly supporting your income, right? If it doesn't contribute to your rental, and if you take it away, you don't have to pay it, the tenants are still happy to pay the same rent, then why is it there, right? Under these trying times, you can change your cash flow because of budgets removing that. So what I regularly do and recommend that people do is review all your service costs, everything that you paid for in a month, your budget, right? Your actual costs. Look for things that are recurring costs, get quote from alternative providers, make sure that you're getting a good price, and then renegotiate the cost with your current provider. These are things that you can do pretty quickly. So even if your rental increases might take some time on that side, these are things that you can do within a question of a week, couple of weeks, or maybe months, right? To restructure your costs. The last thing that I want to highlight is you can also ask your bank for a credit interest review. If you've been a good payer and you've got a good track record and you've got a good credit history and you've got bonds more than one and you're demonstrating that you're a good tenant, you can approach your bank and ask for a credit rate review on your bonds. And the chances are good that if they want to retain you as a customer, that they might grant that. I've successfully applied and used that technique several times. And as your property grow, you can then ask for it on your bonds, not only in the bonds, but also all your short-term debt, your overdraft, your credit card, all those good things. All of those things, you ask them to review your total portfolio. That's fantastic if you could do that, because immediately that reduces your costs on your biggest items. The last thing over here is really just, you can use and swing short-term debt, things that you're carrying on your overdraft. If you're struggling to pay off your credit card or with your car, those are things that have got a very short term. Your payments on those are quite high, and your interest rates on that is also very much higher than your bond. If you have equity in your bonds that is sitting there that you built up, you can actually access potentially some of that equity and pay off or reduce the outstanding debt with higher interest rates and higher payments, and spread it over a longer period of time. But I want to stress that this is only a temporary fix, right? You do this as almost a last resort when none of the above fails and you are in desperate trouble. Then you can stretch it over there. And then what you should do is look at ways to settle or reduce those extra amounts that you swung into your bond over the longer term, that you reduce that again by doing things like flips, capital type projects, or other work that give you income, and then repay that again, right? So once you've done that, you've spread you for the period that you use that that facility in your access facility in your bond, you had lower costs, you had more income to survive, and with the new income that you supply, you're in a much better position, because now you've paid off the money that you stuck into the bond, and you can get the bond back to normal, and you don't have any of the short-term debt. But it is a temporary fix, and you've got to be very, very responsible when you do that. Sorry, that's a big mouthful, Cuddy, but it is a big question, right?
It is a big question, and you actually went quite in depth with it. But as I said, firstly, if people want to know more and have you take on an even deeper dive in terms of this topic, they can see you on our webinar tomorrow. So please, the links will be in the chat box in terms of you to register. It is completely free. And also, I'm going to be going to the questions because we're getting quite a few questions now. However, there we go. However, I would like to bring on, piggybacking off of your comments in terms of costs and how you cut costs. I want to bring on our golden nugget expert in terms of facilities management, Bevan, to have a say in this topic in terms of negative cash flowing properties. And Bevan, there is a loud sound coming from.
Is it my?
There you go.
Hello, Bevan.
Hi, all. Sorry, Kali, is it my sound causing drama?
Oh, okay, yes, because there was like a weird sound that was like whistling or something.
I don't know if it's clear now. Good afternoon, everyone. Hi. I super excited hearing Leon here, because these are like big issues that everyone's experiencing at the moment, and I'm appreciating the sharing that Leon's given. And the reason I make it, or I say it, makes me super excited is all of these sessions that this coffee chat covers. We are exposed to so many of these great speakers, etc., who have these influences and ideas that we normally don't think of on our own. So it always encourages me to be involved in this SAP space. So I don't know, like Leon's covered a huge amount here. And one of the things that stood out for me was that idea of when you're purchasing a property, that you can't really see the strategy of it if you're taking over from another owner and they are already in a cash flow negative space. It's how do you start thinking of ways to make it take advantage of that opportunity to make it cash flow better for yourself. So I think that brings to mind this idea of a lot of the smaller properties. What normally tends to happen is the agents just want to get a lease signed. They just want to make the commission and move on. And the best way for an agent to achieve that is to say, hey, Mr. Landlord, if you want to land a quick tenant, let's include water and lights, or let's include water in the lease agreement and get that tenant in. So that becomes a bit of an issue if you're inheriting that tenant, is to make sure you're looking at that lease agreement to say, okay, if I'm going to optimize this income on this property, like Leon spoke about, you want to try and increase the income or decrease the expenses. So one of those things is to then charge and recover for your utilities. So for me, it's a good thing to review that and to then make sure that if you are going to increase the income by charging for utilities, so be it now charging for water, you need to communicate that with the tenant. So you shouldn't be afraid of doing an addendum to your lease agreement. You're not having to do a whole new lease agreement. It's just a new addendum with that new agreement in place saying, listen, I know your original lease said you weren't paying for water. This is now an addendum. You are going to be paying for water. So, and then obviously there's an agreement because you're now negotiating with the tenant to say, listen, my expenses have gone up. I either have to cancel your lease and find someone else new, or we can meet in the middle here. So it's that negotiating space. Get them to sign an addendum, and then you can start charging them for water or any of these other utility recoveries. And what I've experienced, unfortunately, is when you try to shift someone into paying for utilities like that, suddenly they freak out because they don't actually understand how expensive it is for water. And when you get free water, you just turn on the tap and you let it run constantly and you don't care. So now they're going to still have that mindset when they are being post-billed for water. So I think it is, or I really do encourage people to say, if you're going to do that changeover, start them paying for water, put in a prepaid water meter, because that forces them to be conscious of how they are using their utilities. So they're now aware, like what I put in is what I get out. So if I take too much out, then I've got to keep putting more in. So they start being conscious of their consumption. So for me, that's a big one. And then again, on the utility side is look at your levy statements, your rates, bills, and so on, and look at the other costs that you're paying for. Don't just take your rate statement and pay the whole thing and forget about it. Look at the fact that you're paying for refuse in there. You're paying for sewage recovery. And those little expenses that are burdened to you, those are transferable to the tenant. Leon mentioned on the lease agreement. In the lease agreement, you have there that you are recovering those costs from them as a tenant. Make sure you're recovering the refuse charges. Make sure you're recovering your sewage. So if you're charging for water, often it's either a fixed fee for sewage or there's a kiloliter linked value for sewage. They use 100 kiloliters, they're going to then put 100 kiloliters towards sewage. So you recover that. The only things you can't recover from your tenants are your rates, the full rates value, or your levies, the levy value. Because your tenants, by law and the Rental Housing Tribunal, will challenge you on it if you try to charge your tenants for those fees. You can charge them by including it into your rent, because that's what you're obviously pushing your market value up by, but don't put a line item on your invoices where it says rates charge or levies charge, because they will dispute that and bite you on it. So those are my few tips, a lot more than normal, but I think it's just realizing that a lot of us leave money on the table when it comes to our utilities, and look at that and say, hey, have I increased the prices as they've increased, and have I transferred that onto the tenants as well? So thanks very much.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Bevan. As always, your weekly golden nugget, brought to you by Satin Prepaid. And Bevan is always on, with his nuggets of wisdom. But now we're going to go to the comments section. We'll start with Lucy. And also I want to stress, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to engage with Leon and you want to discuss, you can absolutely contact us at support@SA Property Network, and we'll make sure that, you align with him. And as I said, this is actually a great opportunity because it's one of the few times we'll be able to ask Bevan things for free. Outside of that, you contact us at support@SA Property Network, and we'll make sure we connect you with Bevan. However, we'll start with Sam. Sam says, hi, Leon. I have a few negative cash flowing properties. They have been creating a sizable hole in my pocket until I mixed them with high risk positive cash flowing properties in the city center. Comment. Is that a good idea? No. What's your comment regarding that?
I think that's a good example of where you can subsidize a poorly performing portion of your portfolio with higher yielding acquisitions. But it doesn't solve the the properties which are really not performing. Question. So what do you do about them in the long term? So that's a great short-term strategy, but your profits to you in this business make profit. So my answer to that would be to really follow the things that I've outlined so far in the conversation. Review your income, your costs on the portion of your portfolio that is not performing. There's some great nuggets in there that you can apply. And to the point that Bevan's also made, any consumption-related items, what can you offload to your tenants? That's normal and expected, and what they would pay in any other good establishment, right? If you do that, and then you make a keep or sell decision on the ones that are really ticking no for cash flow and capital growth, that would give you some part of the answer. And then for the ones that say, okay, there is capital growth, so they are in the longer term, it looks like I'm still in a good area, etc., and they'll go from 1 million to 1.5 million in 5 years. The trends are up. It's just my cash flow that I need to solve. Then the question is, what can you do in that area? Then you apply the bullets that I've outlined there in terms of, can I increase my rent, my income, and how do I do that? And it's best to work with a coach like Bevan or any of the other Sapin coaches or a mentor or other investors. There's great support on the network for you for that if you're really struggling to do that on your own. So there's the short answer to that.
Yeah. Okay, and then the next question we have is from Lucy, and she says, "Hi Leon, what does your assistance entail for an individual investor who aspires to move from one property to 2+? I guess it's more so a question to go, if I'm still small scale, do I actually need, somebody like such as yourself in terms of services?"
That is a great question, and we have helped so many investors in the offerings that I mentioned at the beginning of the program, right? We have the investor needs assessment, which really says what it is that you're aspiring to do and which are your preferences to do. And then it's the buying plan would really be the one that is suitable for that, but for you, Lucy. What the buying plan entails is we look at the structure that you've got, which is one of the most important things, is how you set yourself up for business in the beginning. So a buying plan looks at your structure, make sure that we help you set yourself up properly so that you don't have expensive mistakes later just from where and how you buy the property, and that you can get access to funding. We pre-qualify you as an investor with the aim of getting multiple properties and in your structure, so you would know exactly how much you can go and buy for and how much funding the banks you can leverage. And the third thing then is we use that plus your goals. We say to us, I'm looking to make 50,000 Rand net cash flow in a month. Then I develop a strategy and a plan for you that shows you how you would go about doing that with deals that we've done through the brokerage that we've seen in the network, etc. And I'll show you how it is possible and how it's possible to achieve and potentially and often exceed the goals that you've set yourself. Anything is possible in property as long as you have the right assistance and the right power team around you. So for you, I'd strongly recommend a buying plan would be the right place to go.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so as we get on to wrapping up, please ask your questions. If not, I have one more question for you, Bevan. And that pertains to, you've discussed the buying plan and blueprint, but just like a rough overview, you will obviously unpack this even further tomorrow with the webinar with Daniel Kazadi. But what would you actually say is the blueprint? If you're explaining it to somebody like, our viewers who don't know, don't understand, just a brief overview of what exactly is a blueprint.
Okay, 100%. Can I switch back to my screen? I think that'll help you a lot. Can you see the screen at the moment? My screen at the moment?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I've increased the resolution, so hopefully it's a bit more clear. These are the 3 tools that I mentioned a bit earlier. It's the needs assessment, which really plots your strengths and weaknesses and which are the areas you need to improve around 8 different dimensions. That's a holistic view of it. There's the buying plan that we refer to for starters. And then the other one is the investor blueprint. This is for investors with 2+ properties, right? Your personal property plus at least one other. The buying plan, I'm going to recap just on that quickly. It covers what is your goals, and we help you define goal setting is important, right? What is your financing capability? We pre-qualify you, and we pre-qualify you in a structure as well as in your individual capacity. We show you how and where to start. We recommend a legal structure. You'll have a consultation with a tax consultant. We'll show you things to avoid and things to start doing confidently. And then we'll help you choose the right strategies to reach your goal. And we'll show you how it's possible for you. All in the space of an hour interactive walkthrough session after we've spent time with you. The blueprint, which is the question that you had, this is really the one where it's for the investors that have gone beyond that started. They've made the start, and you're now sitting with an existing portfolio that is either performing or not, or parts of it is performing, like Lucy and the other person. We look at your goals, right? It's important to understand where you're going to, what you're trying to achieve. We do the same. We help you understand what is your current finance capability using your existing portfolio, the cash flow that comes from there, your own income ability. What are your resources and how much can you put into, what can you access to buy and grow with? What is the legal structure? And you'll have a session with a legal and tax specialist, Bruno Samar, and his team as part of the blueprint. It's included in there, and they will help you to restructure or make recommendations there, and then also how to pay the least tax possible from there. I'll personally do a full factual portfolio review. I look at every single property in your portfolio. I do the area research, etc. It includes Lightstone reports and area research from there, detailed performance assessments, and I roll it up to the property level. And then I highlight risks, warnings, and I show the opportunities that we spot from that for improvement in every single property. And then out of all that, I do a 10-year forecast, and we show you what is the gap to your goals if you don't do anything where you are now. That shows you how and where do you need to improve. And then we also connect you with the coach that helps you and show you how to change and where to change to improve your business, right? And you'll just see some examples of the outputs of what some few visuals on what it looks like. That really is the blueprint, right? In a nutshell.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Bevan. So as we wrap up, I want to say thank you so much for taking your time just to converse with us today. And to the individuals who want to contact Bevan or seek out his expertise, Bevan, I beg your pardon, Leon, and want to seek out his expertise, you have the link in the chat box, and you can go to support the SA Property Network, and we absolutely make sure you connect with him. However, if you want more understanding and more an in-depth analysis of the discussion for today, you will have that with Leon and Daniel Kazadi tomorrow. So the link is also there in the chat box in terms of registering. It is absolutely free, ladies and gentlemen. But Leon, I want to say thank you so much for joining us and just giving us all of this amazing information, and just getting people thinking about what their current portfolios look like, and how they can optimize them and actually make them even more successful.
Fantastic. I appreciate the opportunity to chat to you and share some insights and some pearls of wisdom, and look forward to tomorrow night. Please join us there. There'll be a lot more detail.
Fantastic. And as I wrap up, I want to say thank you to you guys. As I said, every week we have SAP and Prepaid, and we have the expertise of Bevan, who is very much very astute person in terms of facilities management. And as I said before, we have SAP and Kitchens, and it is a new and super exciting partnership we have with Tim Build. However, if you want to know anything else about what we have going on in terms of events that are in and around the country, please just go onto the link in the chat box that is currently there and the events, and you will find out what we're doing and when we're doing it. However, as always, from me to you, see you next week.